Right now, there are thousands of aircraft that are sitting in storage all over the world. And on top of that, the FAA yesterday just released the Boeing 737 MAX to fly again, which means that Boeing has 450 brand new aircraft that they need to deliver to customers. What needs to be done, maintenance-wise, to take all of these aircraft globally out of storage before you can fly on them as a passenger? I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. This is what we'll be talking about today, so stay tuned. This video is brought to you together with Radarbox. Now, Radarbox is a really cool website and app that allows you to track and follow aircraft in real time no matter where they are of the globe. What's really cool with Radarbox, which kind of sets them apart a bit, is that they're using space-based ADS-B. That means that you can track a flight even if it's somewhere vastly out of an ocean or over a mountain range or somewhere over the desert, where it's traditionally really hard to get ADS-B coverage. On top of that, something that I really like is that you can layer on things like, for example, weather or waypoints, which just makes it much more interactive and easier to understand why things like diversions are happening, for example. Now, you can even track aircraft as they're taxiing around on the ground, which is really cool if you're doing things like flight spotting, for example. If you think that this sounds interesting, well then use the link here below, right? Those of you, the 500 first of you who uses that link and the coupon code Mentour will get a whopping 50% off the normal subscription fee of Radarbox, so check it out. Okay, so it hasn't come as a surprise to you that we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and out of all of the industries that have been really badly hit by this, the aviation industry is one of the worst ones. Right now, there are thousands of aircraft that should be flying with passengers, but are not. They're sitting in storage, some of them in short-term storage, some of them in medium, and some of them in long-term storage. Now, about 8 months ago, I did a video about these storage forms and how maintenance was being done to these aircraft during their storage time. And if you're interested in seeing that, well, check out the video up here. But today, we're starting to see some glimpses of light. All right. Yesterday, the FAA decided to unground the Boeing 737 MAX, which means that those MAXes who are made by Boeing is going to start being delivered to their customers. And on top of that, we have several vaccines who have showed some amazing results. So hopefully, within the next 6 to 8 months, we will see a slight uptick in the aviation industry. And that means that these aircraft, at least some of them, is going to have to be taken out of storage. Now, most of you have probably owned a car or two, and sometimes you leave those cars in the garage. And anyone who's done that for a longer period of time knows that as you go and try to start it up, even if it's been standing inside of a nice warm garage, sometimes the battery isn't working, or sometimes it just won't start and there's some kind of failure on it. And it tends to come with minor things that just doesn't work. Now, you don't want that to happen to your aircraft, right? You don't want to be a passenger flying an aircraft that has been standing for 6 months. So, turns out that the airlines are well aware of this, and there's a big established procedure on how to get these aircraft out of storage, and that's what we're going to be covering now. So, if we take, for example, a new aircraft that has been manufactured by an aircraft manufacturer, but it hasn't been delivered. So it's been going from the factory and straight out into storage. There is a 16-day process to get those aircraft ready for delivery and ready to fly with passengers. So day 1 to day 3, the first 3 days, it's all about preparing it by removing covers, all right? Because during the time that it's been standing outside somewhere, maybe on a desert airport somewhere, it has been covered. Every single opening of that aircraft has been covered. That includes things like the pitot tubes, for example. Those are the tubes that we take our dynamic pressure in through, our airspeed. They need to be covered by a very special type of cover that actually releases moisture from inside, things like that. The static ports, those are the flush ports that on the 737 you can see them just to the right of the forward entry door. They need to be covered with a special kind of tape, and that needs to be removed. And all of the different covers on the engines, on the outflow valve, for the packs, Basically anything that has an opening in it needs to have been covered. That's because animals out there just love finding little holes to creep in and build nests in. So if you're not careful and you're not covering things properly on your 737, you might find a bee's nest inside of the pack, or you might find ants who've crawled into the pitot tubes, and that can cause all types of problems. So removing all of these covers, extremely important. So those first 3 days is also about de-preserving the engines. Now, engines are the most expensive part on an aircraft. Okay, so it's really important that if an aircraft is going to stand on the ground for a prolonged period of time, that they have been preserved well. And part of that is disconnecting all of the fuel lines to the engine, flushing the fuel out of the system, and putting in a kind of preservation fluid instead. Because it turns out that jet fuel, if it's left standing, actually become corrosive. All of the little impurities inside of the jet fuel kind of falls down, trickles down, and saturates all of the internal components. So you need to get rid of that, and you need to put this preservant fluid in instead. Same goes for the engine oil. Engine oil, as it runs through the engine, tends to pick up moisture, and when it picks up moisture, it becomes more and more acidic. And if it is acidic, it means that if it's standing still without being used, it will start eating into things like bearings, for example, accessory gearbox, fuel pumps. So the oil has also been taken out and it needs to be replenished. So these are the first 3 days. Taking away all of the covers, de-preserving the engine, connecting it onto the fuel lines again. Now from day 4 to day 10, we go into the kind of active phase of the testing of the aircraft. So here is where the engineers goes out and uploads new software, for example. Because as the aircraft has been standing on the ground, there would have been several cycles of new navigational database updates, for example. There could be some changes to the flight control computer software, but we're not talking about things that is updating the aircraft, as in, what's going to be done to the 737 MAX. That's a different story. This is periodic updates that needs to be done. On top of that, once all of this has been done, you need to do ground tests of all of the systems. It's verify that the hydraulics are working, hydraulic pumps are running properly. You need to check all of the flight controls for free movement, and you also need to test run the engines. And if you've ever seen an engine being started up after it's been mothballed, after it's been preserved, you know that it's smoking a lot. All right, so you're going to be running the engine for quite a while in order to make sure that you've burned off all of that preservant fluid, and that it's now full of oil and all of the internal parts are properly lubricated. Once all of the ground tests have been done and the engineers are happy with that, well, then the Boeing test flight team is going to take the aircraft out and is going to do a series of test flights. This means going out and doing very prescribed maneuvers where the aircraft has to perform within certain limitations. So it's being very properly managed, monitored, and they're turning off systems like the hydraulic system, for example, making sure that you can still fly the aircraft using manual reversion, dealing with different sequences in the electrical system, and basically going through all of the different parameters that an aircraft needs to show that it can do before it is deemed safe to fly. So now we're at day 10. The remaining days 11 to 16, is about delivering the aircraft. So the first thing that needs to be done is that all of the paperwork from this previous test has to be sent in to the governing aviation authority. So in the case of Boeing, that will be the FAA. The FAA have to go through, make sure that they're happy with all of the paperwork that has been done. And if they are, they're going to sign it off and the aircraft is going to get its airworthiness certificate. Once it has received its airworthiness certificate, then the receiving end, as in the airline that's going to get the aircraft, is going to send their team in. And Boeing in this case, or Airbus, is going to brief the air crew coming in, the test crew that's coming in, about all of the things that has been done to the aircraft. Then, after the briefing has been done, the receiving party is going to go out and they're going to do their test flights, because it's now up to the customer to actually satisfy themselves with that they're happy with the aircraft and the aircraft is performing to their expectations. So once this test battery has been done, it is very similar to what the Boeing or Airbus test pilots have been done, and they're happy with it, then the aircraft is going to be returned down to the gate. Any little other maintenance issues that might need to be fixed is going to be fixed there. That tends to be things like minor stuff that they've noticed during the test flight that they want to have a look at, or minor trimmings inside of the cabin that needs to be fixed, or things like that. Then the aircraft is going to be completely washed again, and after that it's time to deliver the aircraft. So it's at this point that the airline who's buying the aircraft needs to make its final payment. Right? So they pay for the aircraft. Remember in my previous episode we talked about how 50% is paid in PDPs, as in pre-delivery payments, and in down payment. The remaining 50% now is being paid as the aircraft is being delivered. So the way that this tends to happen is that the delivery crew, they have a dinner together with the manufacturer, and then they sit down together with a special flight dispatcher that's going to go through the flight plan, where the aircraft is going to fly to, wherever in the world it's going to be delivered to, talk about weather, fuel, concerns on the route, things like that. And then the crew is going to take the paperwork, making sure that they get all of the delivery paperwork. This is really important. Then sit down in the aircraft, push back, and fly off into the sunset towards wherever they're going to deliver the aircraft. Now, I have had the absolute pleasure of doing one of these delivery flights. It was probably one of the most fun flights that I have done in my career. We took off from Seattle, from Boeing field, flew north up over Canada. We were still in night time over Greenland, where we saw the northern lights, and then we flew down via Iceland in towards Ireland, where we landed in Dublin 10 hours later. Some of you are going to ask, how can you do a 10-hour flight with a 737NG? And the fact is that you can, providing that there's no other passengers on board and that you fill it up to the rim with more than 21 tons of fuel. And that you have some favorable winds, which we did. If you don't, then there's a fuel stop needed in Reykjavik in Iceland. And that's it, guys. So these are the kind of procedures that needs to be done. And you can be sure that the aircraft manufacturers, they have been doing these kind of things for years, because aircraft have been stored both long, medium and short term for different reasons ever since the aviation industry started. So they are well aware on how to kind of bring these aircraft back out of their dormant state, and they can do so safely. So you can have full confidence in that the aircraft that you're flying, even after this pandemic, is going to be fully checked, certified and ready to fly you safely to wherever you're going. Right, guys, that's all I had for today. As always, I would like to hear what your questions are. Do you have any thoughts about this? Do you have anything that you want to tell me about this procedure? File that in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Also, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you enjoyed this kind of materials. And if you do, then subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you've highlighted the notification bell so you know when I'm doing live streams or spontaneous new videos and things like that. And yeah, have an absolutely fantastic day. And remember, check out RadarBox, right? If you're among the first 500 ones, means that you'll get a whopping 50% off on any deal that they have. So use the code Mentour, check out RadarBox, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right, guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then, check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.